just want to make sure that... Good morning and welcome to the members of the media. Thanks for coming out this Sunday morning to our first media conference here at our party office since actually the last general election last month, and also since the budget reading earlier this month. We have actually made a number of media releases, but we have not had a media conference, so it's good to see members of the media join us here this morning for this Sunday morning briefing. We want to speak very specifically about the budget and major implications of statements arising from the budget speech and the various contributions in the budget debate. There are essentially 3 points that we would like to make with respect to the budget, and of course the budget is a reflection and a report as well on the state of the national economy. So our comments and concerns will be with respect to not just the budget with government revenue and expenditure, but also with respect to the state of the economy more generally. I think that all citizens, regardless of party support, affiliation, or persuasion, would have been deeply disturbed about the very many revelations made by the Minister of Finance and after him other ministers of government with respect to overspending, misspending, waste, mismanagement of the government's resources, which of course don't belong to the government but are taxpayers' money, and possible acts of corruption committed during the last 5.5 years under the People's Partnership UNC government. Very many deeply disturbing revelations were made, whether they be the huge debt at WASA, the national debt, which ran up as an overdraft to almost $9 billion just before the end of September of this year, the various contracts that were being awarded by state enterprises like the Education Facilities Company Limited and other state enterprises. All of these things were deeply disturbing because they suggested that during the period 2010 to 2015, billions of dollars were being misspent and perhaps were being corruptly accruing to a few contractors and individuals, friends and family of the ruling party. This is very, very disturbing. But for us in the MSJ, what is necessary at this time is for these matters not simply to lie in the public domain as revelations. It cannot be a matter of scoring political points in the parliament or on the political hustings or on a political platform. This information must now lead to action against those who may have engaged in acts of wrongdoing, either misbehavior in public office, acts of corruption, and so on. We cannot tolerate any longer in Trinidad and Tobago criminal activity, whether it be at the level of murder, rape, robbery, or at the level of white-collar crime and fraud, to take place with impunity, where people who do wrongdoing do not pay for the crimes that they have committed. We cannot go on as a society with that any longer. And we must move from the realm of old talk and speculation and so on to the realm of fact, and with facts and evidence to the point of prosecution, and where there's strong enough evidence, conviction, and people being punished for crimes. And so we in the MSJ are saying that we would like the government to make a clear statement of intent on these matters, not on individual matters, but how it intends to pursue the issue of all of this information that is now in the public domain with respect to mismanagement of the country's resources, taxpayers' money, by the last government. We would like to know that there is a clear policy to establish forensic investigations by competent, independent forensic auditors so that the evidence can be ferreted out. We would like to know that special prosecutors, perhaps, if necessary, are appointed to focus specifically on this issue of white-collar crime and misbehavior in public office, as, for example, took place when a former Attorney General was able to get a special prosecutor and forensic auditors to investigate wrongdoing in a previous UNC government. We would like to see that kind of approach being taken so that there is certainty, because we do not have confidence that the police service has the necessary resources and ability to do all of this investigation on its own. It requires special forensic auditors and investigators, special prosecutors, to gather the evidence and then present it to the competent authorities for prosecution in the courts of Trinidad and Tobago. That is vital. We cannot have Beetham wastewater just remaining as it is, or the billion-dollar expenditures on legal fees remaining as it is. We cannot have what we are now hearing of hundreds of millions of dollars being spent by the government on the Children's Hospital, even though this was supposed to be a fully funded project by the Chinese government, which would have been a loan to the Trinidad and Tobago government. We cannot have, for example, the reports hanging in the air of the cost escalation of our early childhood center from $3 or $4 million to $11 and $12 million hanging in the air, or other acts with respect to contracts awarded to favored contractors like SIS and Calco and Danny's hanging in the air. These matters must be fully investigated, and if nothing was done wrong, then these persons' names have to be cleared. If something was done wrong, then the wrongdoers must be brought to justice. That's our first point. Related to this, of course, is our concern about Section 34, which matter is going to be heard in the Privy Council very soon. And obviously that Privy Council judgment will have major implications for those individuals. We cannot comment on what the Privy Council may be adjudicating on. But what we want to get to the bottom of, because we demonstrated for this, we made statements on this and so on, was whether Section 34 was deliberately promulgated or proclaimed selectively and surreptitiously in the dark of the night on Independence Day in order to benefit the UNC's financiers, and whether or not there is evidence of that, what in effect would amount to a criminal conspiracy. That cannot be left hanging, regardless of what the courts say with respect to whether the repeal of the whole legislation denied those financiers their rights or otherwise. We're not concerned about the court processes or the court decision. What we're concerned about was the root of the selective and surreptitious proclamation of Section 34, and that must be cleared up once and for all. And there are others, Prison Gate, etc. All of those issues, we must have closure on all of those issues as a country. And as we bring closure to these issues, by the government taking the right policy approach on those questions, they don't investigate, that is left to others, but they must set the right policy framework for those investigations to take place. We want to then have the government focus on how to address what is clearly a difficult economic situation and a difficult fiscal situation, where the deficit, that is the difference between revenue and expenditure for this year, 2015 going to 2016, is $21 billion. And the minister is proposing, of course, to close that deficit from proceeds of sales of assets and other one-off revenue items which had been put in train by the previous government. But our position is that there must be no further sale of state assets, no selling of the crown jewels, no privatization, whether it is Petrotrin, NGC, TSTT, T&Tech, any of those state assets, those must not be sold because those belong to all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and any sale of those assets to close the budget deficit, the MSJ will oppose. What we are therefore calling on is the rolling out of the process which had been committed to by the Minister of Finance for major consultation on the issue of the state of the economy and the state of the government's fiscal position, and how the burden of adjustment or the burdens of adjustment which have to be made are going to be shared in a fair and equitable manner so that ordinary people, working people, particularly those working at minimum wage level and below, the ordinary workers of this country, those in the public service, oil workers and so on, electricity workers and others, that they are not made to bear the brunt of the burden of adjustment at this time. We would oppose any measures where there is austerity which causes the majority of the population, pensioners, retirees, children and so on, to bear the brunt of adjustment. So we are calling for that process of dialogue to start up urgently so that we can arrive at consensus in the country on the best way forward in the interest of ordinary people, including small business people, small and micro entrepreneurs and so on, who would be hard hit by the increase in business levy, green fund, and the increase in NIS contributions as well. So we have a lot to discuss in the country, and that requires major dialogue going forward. So those are our 3 points. 1, policy framework must be announced with respect to bringing to justice wrongdoers. They must pay for the crimes that they committed against the people of Trinidad and Tobago. 2, we must have no privatization of state assets to try to balance the budget. 3, we must have the process of dialogue starting urgently so that we arrive at consensus on how the burdens of adjustment must be shared. And we are saying that the burdens of adjustment must not go on the backs of the majority. We are here as MSJ in defense of the majority of the people of this country. We stand for justice, and we therefore stand with the people against any measures of austerity that others may wish to advance and pursue. Okay, that's our statement. And of course, we'll take questions on anything that you may want to ask. Kita, no? Suan? Ivan? No?
Well, you made your case clear.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, okay. All right, thank you very much.